there's a debate out there. I think it's probably the most overriding debate in college football right now. Is Cincinnati legit? Is their schedule legit? Can they hang with Bama? What are your thoughts about that game?
Yeah, I think, listen, the body of work speaks for itself. The way they stepped up last year and went toe-to-toe with Georgia. Now, granted, Georgia at that particular time wasn't motivated for three and a half quarters. When push came to shove, Georgia, won the ball game in the final 5 or 6 minutes of that matchup. But Cincinnati proved, at least in the interior, that they can go toe-to-toe with one of the better teams in the SEC. Des Ridder did struggle in the second half of that ball game, but they were able to run the football with Jerome Ford in that matchup. And again, that's the Achilles heel of Alabama when you look at this ball game right here, right now. If Cincinnati does have success and they can run the football and sustain drives and keep Bryce Young and that explosive offense on the sidelines, they're going to have an opportunity. That's the biggest thing. Can they force turnovers and can they run the football consistently? If they can do that, I think they have a shot at least to cover this number, Mark, plus 14, plus 14 and a half. They are plus 10 in turnover margin entering this ball game and have two legitimate cornerbacks, including Sauce Gardner. That is one of the most elite corners in terms of bump and run coverage that we'll see in the college game. And at the end of the day, they beat Indiana. They beat Notre Dame on their field in South Bend. And quite honestly, in this season, they deserve to be in the college football playoff.
Bama with the number 2 rushing defense in the country. So you got to think the Bearcats are going to have a tough time running, although Desmond Ridder, that's part of his game. Your thoughts about the Cincy offense against the Bama defense and Will Anderson?
I think in, big spots, especially big matchups, Luke Fickell and the offensive staff are going to have to break tendency. Obviously, they want to run the football with Jerome Ford, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to run it on first and second down. You could be creative. You could utilize Des Ridder's athleticism on the perimeter in terms of the RPO game, play action on first and second down that will open up running lanes in the second half of this ball game. So I am curious to see how they go about it, because I think if Cincinnati goes into this ball game and says, you know what, we're just going to go toe-to-toe with the Alabama front seven and Will Anderson, I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think they need to utilize the screen game, neutralize the speed of Alabama early on, get them to think pass, and then utilize the run game maybe in the second half of this ball game. But again, Alabama, as well as anybody, and you know this, watching Alabama each and every week, they jump up early, they dictate the tempo. And if you look at some of the games that they have struggled this year, right, even in that ball game against Texas A&M, Zach Calzada, Texas A&M broke through with a field goal. They were able to shorten the game, put the pressure on Bryce Young. You look at Arkansas, they scored first and played well early on as well. That's the key to going toe-to-toe with Alabama. So we'll see if they can do that. If Bryce Young and the crew jump up early, it's going to be lights out, in my opinion. But I still feel Cincinnati will cover this number in the college football playoff December 31st.
Yeah, Joe, what do you make of this Bama group? Because I got to think that if they weren't the name Bama for much of this season, they're going to get ranked 7th or 8th in the country because they just weren't that impressive. Florida, LSU, Arkansas, the games that you mentioned, especially Auburn, they had no business winning that game. Their offensive line was a mess. They couldn't run the ball against some of those better defensive fronts in the SEC. Then they take on the team that's supposed to have the most dominant defensive front we've seen in years. Right. Suddenly, they fixed the offensive line issues, and they're on their way. It's just incredible.
It really is. And that's what makes Nick Saban so special, is that he is the mad scientist. He's like Bill Belichick, and they are very similar in terms of the NFL coach and obviously what he's done at the collegiate level. They game plan better than anybody. They're like a chameleon. And you mentioned the rushing attack for Alabama. Think about this, Mark. They're only averaging about 4 yards per carry. They only have 3 games where they pounded the rock for over 200 yards, right? That is their lowest rushing total in terms of yards per carry since prior to 2009. That's how long it's been in terms of the dominance of the offensive line. It's all been Bryce Young. It's all been the speed of those wide receivers. John Mechie, that most likely won't play in this ballgame. Jamison Williams, the Ohio State transfer, and Latu, the tight end. So they do utilize a lot in formations. And what's more intriguing is that outside the players and the personnel, How about the offensive coordinators? Whether it be Brian Dable, Lane Kiffin, and now Bill O'Brien, they just do not miss a beat. Now, this offense looks different than it did a couple of years ago. They've been more pass heavy with the quarterbacks that they have had, Mac Jones, Tua, and now with the progression of Bryce Young. But I agree with you. If they don't have a running game in this ball game, and that's what Cincinnati, I think, will take away first, is, okay, we're going to take away Brian Robinson. We're going to take away your ability to pound the rock. Now we want you to beat us over the top. It's really pick your poison, but I think they match up pretty well in the secondary. But it is those one-on-one matchups in space, motion. Look for Jameis Williamson to be utilized in a lot of different formations in this ball game, and that's where they can create one-on-one opportunities. We'll see if they can do it. That's the chess match that'll play out, obviously, on December 31st.